This is Macro Analytics, delivering frank conversations on global macroeconomics and market analysis, outside the mainstream, featuring discussions and debates between Gordon T. Long, publisher and editor of GordonTLong.com, and his guests. The content of this discussion is strictly the opinion of the participants. It is in no way a solicitation for business, nor is it to be considered investment advice of any sort. Always consult a registered investment advisor before making any investment decision. These discussions are extremely hard-hitting and terribly frank, and parental discretion is advised. Now, on to the show.
Good morning. I'm Gord Long with GordonTLong.com. As part of our ongoing series on financial repression, I have Haydon Perryman joining us from London. Haydon is an experienced FATCA program manager and has in fact mobilized 3 FATCA programs from scratch, including those of Lloyd's Banking Group and the investment banking arm of RBS. Haydon has been working on FATCA for 4 years now. Welcome.
Good morning, Gord.
Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to talk to you. This is an important subject that it's getting more and more visibility, especially from people we've been talking to about the elements of financial repression. Hey, maybe we could start with you giving our listeners some level of understanding of your background and what led you to getting into this area.
Okay, so I've been running FATCA programs for about 4 years. I started off at Lloyd's Banking Group with their FATCA program, launched that from scratch. Then, as you said, RBS, Barclays, and I've been helping software providers solutions to FATCA as well since then. I'm an accountant by competence. I'm qualified, and I went from accounting into compliance programs, management reporting programs, business intelligence, and this whole wave of compliance came, as you know. And since about 2005, I've done nothing but compliance programs and nothing but FATCA since November 2010.
Could you tell people what FATCA is? First of all, what does that acronym stand for?
FATCA stands for the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And you won't find that act on the American statute books. It's tucked away as Title V of the Hire Act. So if you want to look for it, FATCA, you won't find it. It's a, if you like, a colloquialism. We use that term so much we accept that FATCA is an act, which it isn't. It's Title V of the Hire Act. And essentially FATCA is about finding Americans abroad as natural persons or as individuals, as the layperson would call them, or Americans investing via shell companies. And it's about identifying them and reporting them back to the US. But important, so that's been very much about American citizens. But to do that, Gord, the rest of the world would have to come along. And the rest of the world would only play ball with the US on FATCA if they have what's referred to as IGAs. Those are intergovernmental agreements. And through those intergovernmental agreements, local governments are able to get through the legal impediments and report to the IRS and navigate things like data protection, so on and so forth. So you've got the American FATCA Act, you've got the IGAs, and then, Gord, what's happened is that a few countries like UK and the rest of the EU G5, so that's countries like Italy, Spain, France, Germany, the UK, they all got together and agreed to share FATCA information intra-EU G5. And from there, the G20 got hold of it, and from there you've got the AEOI, so you've got the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, have worked on what's called the Automatic Exchange of Information, or more often, the Common Reporting Standard. And the Common Reporting Standard, I would argue, Gordon, is even way bigger than FATCA. People need to understand this, that FATCA is the CRS in microcosm, by which I mean FATCA deals with Americans, but the Common Reporting Standard starts 1/1/2016. And I understand, Gordon, a lot of people have been feeling that they've been isolated by their own government for cruel and unusual punishment through FATCA.
Specifically the expats living outside the country, people being transferred around that have to use a foreign bank account, they're the ones that feel that this is predatory. I didn't mean to interrupt. Question about it.
You're right, they do feel it's predatory, and you know what, they're absolutely right, but they shouldn't feel alone. The whole world is being discriminated against now. There's no particular race or origin is unique there. It's just that FATCA is the first. It's just that the Common Reporting Standard, we want to get to everybody, everywhere in the world, and establish all of their residences for tax as of January 1, 2016. There's 57 countries that have signed up to that as early adopters starting in January 1, 2016. So I understand American expats, and I don't get me wrong, I completely agree, and I sympathise. The only consolation I can give them is they're not alone. This is going to happen to everybody all over the world now. The era of banking secrecy is completely gone. People lobbying against FATCA are doing it way too late because people have written in their IGAs. Reporting starts in March of this year. So people who are lobbying against FATCA are reacting once the horse has bolted.
There was so little information or knowledge that anything like this was even happening. And as you said, it's too late now. It's done. And people are now just learning about what's happened or happening. Haydon, as they try and internationalize their investments, because they're so concerned about currencies and depreciation, debasement of currencies as these governments print more money, so they go to try and diversify in perfectly legal fashion and are quite willing to pay taxes associated with it. It's not anything devious, but then they find that the foreign bank says, sorry, you're an American, the paperwork to handle this isn't worth our time and energy, so we don't want you.
Now there you fit on an important point, actually, Gord. The banks, and I've seen this a lot, are completely misunderstanding FATCA. Expelling your American customers won't get you off the grid, because under FATCA, it's in the presumptive positive, which is to say, Gordon, that FATCA assumes that your customer is an American unless you've got evidence to the contrary. So my next door neighbour, if I'm his bank, I've got to approach him and get him to certify that he's not an American, for me to treat him as anything other than an American. Or I've got to have evidence on my system that he's not an American. Without the evidence, I've got to treat him as an American. And so just saying, well, look, I know you're an American, therefore I'm going to throw you out, that's not going to save me anything. That's going to deny me all my US income. It's going to damage my reputation, but it won't get me through the really expensive customer outreach and documentation I've got to do for all of my customers, regardless of whether I already know that they're American. So yeah, I know a lot of prestigious banks are just having some kind of exodus of their American customers, and they've completely missed that's not in their interest or anyone's interest. And in point of fact, Gord, it's not what FATCA demands.
What's really driving this? Obviously, on the surface, it would say it's tax and making sure that every government feels they're getting their fair share of tax, especially the U.S. government that believes any earned income anywhere in the world as an American citizen, whether you live here or not, is their income. Is there more here? Do you suspect there's more going on? Is this a precursor to something like capital controls?
Well, it's interesting. So the ostensible reason for this, as you say, is tax. But Gord, I would say it can't possibly be about tax, but for this reason. There was already legislation in the US dealing with Americans evading tax via offshore accounts. And that was Chapter 3, or commonly known as qualified intermediary. Obama, the American administration, already had on its statute books everything it needed to go after all of these banks and fine them and do all sorts of things. And in point of fact, Gord, all these high-profile names you've seen in the press recently, they've all been prosecuted without FATCA. So FATCA's done nothing for that. I would say, no, FATCA is about two things to my mind. It's about politicians making a display of tackling tax evaders. Okay. Just that, making a display of it, because you could do it with the pre-existing legislation. You just have to finance the IRS to do it. It would be self-financing, actually. So you have to finance them in the short term, and then they would make their money. So it can't possibly be about tax collection per se. It might be about being seen to go after tax evaders. But here's something for you, Gordon. Obviously, I'm a Brit. You can hear that. And this is going to seem tangential, but it's highly relevant. When we lost the war to the Normans in 1066, William the Conqueror came over and he didn't know what he conquered. And one of the first things he implemented was a Doomsday book. And the Doomsday book told him exactly where all the wealth was and who owned it. And that meant he could tax it. And of course, FATCA and the Common Reporting Standard are doing the same thing. They're revealing where all the wealth is everywhere in the world. And to my mind, that means what they're going to start doing now is taxing that. It does open up that opportunity that wasn't there before. Yes. I mean, your system, by the American, I appreciate your Canadian, Gord, but the American tax system and the British tax system have in common that they tax income. What FATCA and the CRS enable them to do is to start taxing capital. You couldn't tax it before because you didn't know where it was, and it was so easy to hide. That's all gone now. So yeah, you can start taxing capital, but as you say, you can start this. This means you can start to confiscate it as well. So neither one of us knows for sure, but it does open that possibility.
Yeah, there's a system in place for it. It seems to be urgent. It seems to be pushed quite quickly and aggressively. Is that a frank observation?
Incredibly aggressively, actually. Now, what's interesting is that it's so aggressive it could make you cynical, because all of the opposition seems to be focused on the US version, US Treasury version of FATCA, and very few people have realised that the whole thing's coming up on a worldwide scale as of January 1 of next year. Who's heard of the Common Reporting Standard? Who's heard of the Automatic Exchange of Information? Well, it's FATCA on a global scale, and nobody's even heard of it. It's almost as if the US version of FATCA's up there to be attacked, but actually it's a decoy. The real thing which is going to make it impossible to have wealth without everyone knowing, without local governments knowing about it, is the Common Reporting Standard. And the speed with which that's been agreed to by so many countries is almost unprecedented. So I would agree, it's unprecedented, and you could argue that FATCA is a decoy for what's really happening, and that's enough to make anybody cynical.
That's an excellent observation. It's a Trojan horse, and really it's the Common Reporting Standard, and the fact that this many governments would agree so quickly. They can't agree on anything in any particular order. There's a few that object very strenuously at a G20, but this is just like, no, this is urgent. And
yeah,
are they all? Maybe they're all out of tax money, and they just need more tax money. But I've always found that it's not quite what it's proposed to be. It's always something else typically driving it.
Well, that's the thing. Tax is so boring. It's a place where you can do really evil things and nobody will notice.
Spoken from an expert.
Yeah.
What sort of things is somebody just learning about this? What should they know, and where do they go for more information?
I'm going to give an analogy here. My late father always taught me, at some stage, Haydon, you're going to get caught driving too fast, and a policeman's going to pull you over. And when that happens, Haydon, just accept it, put your hands on the wheel, take what he has to say, take it all on the chin. And who knows? You make it away scot-free, but if you start getting belligerent, if you start getting angry about it, you're totally screwed. And you know what? He was right. A few times I've been pulled over, just kept my hands on the wheel, just said, yeah, I know I was speeding, I was in the wrong. And the policeman's just said, you know what, I've got better things to do than prosecute you, and they've gone. I would say the same is true of FATCA. Okay, you're going to get approached for FATCA. It's happened. You now need to get into a situation where you know which form to fill out, you know how to fill it out. I would say to people, hey, and I'm not saying it's great what's happened with FATCA. What I'm saying is it's happened. Let's deal with it now. The milk has been spilt. So get familiar with which form you need to fill out. Fill out the form. I'm not saying send it to your bank. What I'm saying is know which form you've got to fill out and have it filled out so when it comes, if it comes from your bank, you're not doing anything under a sense of urgency and under duress. So assume that the wolf will come to your door and have something to give that wolf. Don't send it preemptively, but have a copy of that. Also, what people tend to be forgetting is that if one bank comes to you for that form, you can bet your bottom dollar that another bank will come, another bank will come, another bank will come, So keep a copy of what you're sending. So know which form you're going to have, you need to fill out. Fill it out. Keep copies of that so that when the bank comes, you're ready, and they are going to come.
Where would they get that form?
If they're an American, it's a W-9.
Okay, W-9.
And if it's a non-American, so you can tell I've been working with Americans too much now using that kind of phraseology. But if you're not an American, typically the form you should fill out is a W-8. There are 5 different types of W-8, but you can find them all on the IRS website. So an individual should fill out a W-8 BEN. Legal entities generally should fill out a W-8 BEN-E. The BEN-E is for entity. So individuals, W-8 BEN. Most entities, W-8 BEN-E. If you're an intermediary or for what's called a flow-through entity, it's W-8 IMY. And there's 2 others. There's a W-8 EXP and ECI. ECI is for effectively connected to income. So really, do your research, work out which one is right for you. And here's a really weird thing, Gord. Banks can't tell you under the US tax code which form you should fill out because that's considered tax advice. So here's a really strange thing. They can know which form you should fill out. They can't tell you. You could fill out the wrong form and you could send it to them. And they can say, hey, Haydon, you filled out the wrong form. So, well, how do you know? Well, we know enough about you to know which form you should have filled out. Well, why didn't you just tell me that then? Well, we couldn't. Well, that would be tax advice.
That's right, tax advice. They can't do that.
Hey, but here's a strange thing as well, is that the Common Reporting Standard takes a completely different view on this sort of thing. The Common Reporting Standard, CRS, encourages financial institutions to give their customers advice on which forms to fill out and allows the financial institutions to pre-fill out a lot of these forms and only draws a line insofar as you can't tell your customer which jurisdictions you think they're resident in for tax purposes. So the CRS is way more intuitive, whereas the IRS version is just counterintuitive all the way.
Now, as a program manager, what kinds of things are you now involved with personally?
Well, the biggest problem with FATCA is that people don't know what it is, and there's so many myths. So honestly, it's like anything. If you're a program manager, you're really a project manager on a way bigger scale. Project management is just saying, where are we, where do we want to be, how are we going to get there? Well, most people don't even know what they are because they can't even agree on what FATCA is. And it's difficult to know where you want to be when you've got the US Treasury version of FATCA, the IGAs, and the Common Reporting Standard, ostensibly similar, but massively different and huge ambiguities. So I find I have to eliminate a lot of fog, and I have to help people navigate these regulations in a way that's pragmatic. Now I've got what I call a FATCA policy, which I say for every institution, this is what you need to do to navigate through this maze. It's not perfect, but you'll be able to evidence good faith. No institution can be completely FATCA compliant. And the reason for that, Gordon, and that's why they need a policy, that's why they need to be able to prove good faith. And the reason they can't be compliant 100%, Gordon, is because to be 100% compliant, you would need all of your documentation from all of your clients and customers. Well, to most people who aren't Americans, who aren't used to the American tax code, say like the European baker, if I'm a bank and I send a request for a W-8 to a European baker, he's going to think I've got three heads. He's not going to understand why he's got to fill out an American tax form. And so it's going to take ages for them to respond. And when they do respond, it'll be the wrong blooming form. It'll be completely invalid. It's going to take years. So, nobody's going to be completely FATCA compliant. So they need policies, procedures, and ways of evidencing good faith. So I clear all the fog and I navigate the way through complying with these regulations to an agreed level. And that's very difficult, by the way.
You've put together probably a definitive piece of work here. We put it up on our site so people can link to it directly and download it. I caution them, it's over 500 pages. Maybe you don't need to go through all 500, but there's some very good summary kinds of information in it. Would be a good starting point for them to download this document. Because I think you're the only one that's put anything out that is this comprehensive.
Well, yeah. I mean, put it this way: I've never solved a problem that I can't draw, and in the same way, I can't comply with a regulation that I can't explain. And if there are key concepts like definitions of the most basic term, like participating, that are confusing, you're never going to deliver that. So that's why I did it. So yes, it's 500 pages, but I think, Gordon, the first 200 pages are just definitions of terms and an index, which is really, really long. But you need that definition of terms so that you don't get lost. Any expert or anyone pretending to be an expert in the FATCA space can quite easily lose you. And what I've tried to do is make it so I'm taking you with me all of the way. Exactly.
I grew up in the IT industry, and I thought we created a lot of acronyms. I'll tell you, this is a whole new language, this one. But you make it very simple and easy to follow. And when you strip it all out, it is really straightforward.
It is.
The complexities, the ability for institutions to implement it in an effective manner. And the implementation is going to be incredibly difficult. And so they'll take easy ways. They'll take shortcuts. They will just say, we don't want your business or whatever. It seems to be the way. Any closing comments you can leave our listeners?
I would say, for those of you who are being hit hard by FATCA, and I know it's real, just bear in mind it's going to happen to the whole rest of the world. So you're not alone. It's just the rest of the world don't know it's going to happen to them yet. And my overall message to you would be, you're probably going to get a letter from your bank asking you about your FATCA status. So work out which W8 you should fill out and fill that out when you're not under duress. And keep copies of it. Because whether we like it or not, FATCA's here to stay. That would be my overall message to people. That's how you can make it as least painful for yourself as you possibly can.
How could people get in touch with you, learn more about the things that you are further on your work besides the document we have up here to download?
Okay, so that document has in the bottom left-hand corner of all the pages of my website, and my contact details are all there. It's haydonperryman.com, but just by downloading that document you've got, they'll see a lot of references to that website. They'll be able to find me. So yeah, haydonperryman.com, I'm here.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll have to have you back again.
Thank you very much, Gordon. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been Gordon T. Long, editor and publisher of GordonTLong.com. New recordings are posted regularly and can be found at GordonTLong.com. New show notifications are available through RSS feed, iTunes, and other social networking venues at GordonTLong.com.